From the heart of Maine, this is the DuView Podcast.
All right, and welcome to your September episode of the DuView Podcast. I'm your host, Du, a.k.a. Ryan Dumont, and yeah, guys, we have made it to the month of September. School's back in session. All the parents are happy, the kids are not, but, we are moving on to yet another season. I'm even back in school myself, mind you. But that said, it's been a... It's been a busy, summer, folks. If you couldn't tell from, tuning in over the last couple episodes and just also how things have been going, with social media wise. Another thing with the podcast, it's just been a busy set of events, and I mean, there's no secret that there's a lot going on with yours truly, and so we're just trying to make do with the best we can at this moment. But that said. To preface, I guess, not to turn anybody away, but to preface, this episode is going to be a little different. And what I mean by that is it's going to be kind of more like if you've seen the show 60 Minutes, they have separate little stories. And specifically, I'm going to have two stories for you today. Both of them have to do with the state of Maine, and both of them show two very different sides of the state of Maine in a lot of ways. One is specific to my hometown, or I guess where I live in Augusta, which is CARA. I've talked about CARA a lot on the podcast before, which is Capital Area Recreation Association. But CARA actually celebrated its 50th anniversary this year, and it's a big deal. And I want to kind of talk to you guys a little bit more about CARA. Previous than I have with my other guests that have been on. I kind of want to give you guys a timeline and really kind of explain the story to try to explain to people that, what the organization is, what it isn't, and also just try to explain to people in Maine and specifically Central Maine that not just the sports fields on the Piggery Road are not owned by the city of Augusta. They are not owned by, the town, any town or anything like that. They're not maintained by tax dollars. It's actually all private and volunteer. Nobody makes a salary, that type of thing, guys, and we'll get into that in just a minute. But that said, it's there's the other side of the coin too, which I'll unpack the other side of the story in a minute. You'll see. But like I said, I'm trying to do things a little bit differently in some of these solo episodes, so it's not just the same, old thing all the time. Or I understand it can be boring listening to the story of one certain area for an hour or so. So just try to split it up and do something a little bit different. I mean, this episode may be a little bit shorter than others. It might not be. I don't know, to be honest with you. I'm just kind of winging it and trying something different here, guys. Like I said, I've been busy, and that is the reason for the style change in this episode. It's just is what it is. I like to keep doing this monthly, but it's just, like I said, it's been busy. And so with that said, I just want to make sure that, I'm still putting out a good piece of content and whatnot for you guys. Because, you're part of the reason I do it, the fans, the people. But first and foremost, before we get into our two stories, CARA 50, and I'll unload the other story in a minute, a little bit of surprise to keep you wait until the other side of things. But Dumont and DJing and Events is the sponsor for this episode. If you need any type of wedding services from sound to MC to DJing, you can contact Dumont DJing Events on Facebook, Dumont DJing and Events Facebook page. So you can check that out and book them there, serving all of New England since 2022. So check them out, guys. Dumont DJing and Events. That's also me. It's my side hustle. So that said, basically have me host your event, whether it be a wedding or whatnot. All right, advertisements, ad read out of the way. We can now get into the meat and potatoes of the episode, guys. The DuView Podcast, episode 58. Our first story is called CARA 50. Now, again, guys, CARA stands for the Capital Area Recreation Association, and I guess what you could call the CARA complex. It is a complex of sports fields in Augusta, Maine. It is located on the Piggery Road, which is right next to the Arboretum and across the way from some state office buildings, as well as AMHI, the state mental hospital, and on the other side off of the Coney Road by Maine Academy of Arts, or the Maine Arts Institute, which is a charter school over on the Coney Road, as well as the intersection on that side of the Coney Road where you can find the Piggery from that exit. Like I said, two-sided, a little bit over a mile-long road complex with baseball fields, basketball courts, softball fields, lacrosse fields, horseshoes. You need recreational outdoor space in Augusta. We pretty much got you covered in some way, shape, or form. And I'm also on the CARA board. I mean, I have my CARA polo on. The podcast is a sponsor of CARA. We do the sound for the CARA auction and other CARA events. So it's a great all around institution, guys. And so I guess I just kind of want to give you a little bit more of the story about this organization. And, I spend a lot of time donating time to it and money. So, it's just good to kind of give you guys a little bit of insight in what I do outside of this. So, CARA 50 volunteers are the lifeblood of the Capital Area Recreation Association. The generosity of citizens, local businesses, and area contractors have made it possible for CARA to grow from one Little League field and one Farm League field into a large outdoor recreation area. CARA is utilized by the Augusta Little League, Capital Area Youth Softball Association, the Augusta uh, National Babe Ruth League, and Capital Area Sports Club, the Capital Area Valley Horseshoe Pitchers Association, Kennebec Youth Lacrosse, St. Michael's School, Coney Middle and High School, among others. The CARA Complex is a private, nonprofit organization and is very unique. The area developed for outdoor recreational activities is nearly 1 mile long and includes playing areas for baseball, softball, horseshoes, football, soccer, field hockey, basketball, lacrosse, and cross country for youths and adults alike. The CARA complex is used for other purposes such as walking, jogging, cross country skiing, snowshoeing, and others by local residents, as well as the state of Maine employees and workers from adjacent buildings from dusk till dawn daily. Because of the broad based level of commitment to the complex for almost 4 decades, there is a significant sense of ownership by the area's residents and businesses who have so generously contributed through donations and other resources, plus many of non paid volunteer hours that have been necessary to develop and maintain this complex. Now, CARA got started, guys, because there was a severe, as we'll see in just a little bit, was a severe lack of good outdoor recreation space. Not to give away too much of the story, but that was the real issue, and that's why the whole reason that the CARA board got started and CARA was even created in the first place. As you heard in my earlier reading, it's started out as just 2 ball fields and is now much, 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 much more than that. For many years, the state of Maine farmed the area located east side of Hospital Street. The large tract of land containing over 200 acres was used to provide hay, grow corn and other crops, and raise pigs for consumption by the patients and staff at the Augusta Mental Institute. This was ended in the late 60s, and the land was transferred to the Department of Conservation to be managed by Bureau of Public Lands. Since the late 50s, Augusta East Little League occupied a small portion of this property to use for its Little League program. A regulation Little League field and adjoining Farm League field had been constructed. Baseball was very popular during this period, and the need for additional facilities became of paramount importance. A recommendation by a legislative study group to sell the large tract of land for commercial or industrial use prompted a group of Augusta East Little League officials to set in motion the formation of a group of individuals interested in providing the needed recreational opportunities for the youth of the greater Augusta area. Incorporated and was accomplished in 1974 at the Capital Area Recreation Association became a reality. With the help of Senator Bennett Cates of Augusta, legislation was passed allowing the Bureau of Public Lands the authority to enter a lease agreement with the private nonprofit enterprises. 25-year lease was signed. In later years, the lease was renegotiated. At present, prior to this year, CARA has a 99-year lease for approximately 80 acres of land located on the north side of the piggery. There are many conceptions and misconceptions regarding the status of the Piggery Road, including the belief that the Piggery Road is a public way owned and maintained by the city of Augusta. To our knowledge, or to my knowledge, the Piggery Road was never laid out as a public way and was merely a typical farm road used for farming purposes by the Department of Mental Health, which grew crops, grazed cattle, and maintained a piggery, which supplied food for the patients of AmHigh, and in turn, this also provided a therapeutic benefits for the patients that worked there. Many years ago, a water line was constructed to serve the facilities at Togus and the route of said line just south of the Piggery Road, so in all probability this farm road had been in existence for over 100 years. Like many farm roads, the passage of time and deep ruts and general depressions of the roadway. Adequate for farm equipment, the roadway was not suitable for vehicular traffic, however, particularly in the wet weather, and local towing companies received many calls for assistance in the area, as well as even part of the piggery at one time. I know folks that probably graduated from the local high school in the 70s, used to grab cases of beer and race down the road, and go mudding and such, which obviously is not something you can do over there anymore because it's, a youth, youth complex. So I guess it's definitely an improvement for the better there as well. However, when CARA obtained its lease in 1974, the Bureau of Public Lands requested that CARA remove all the stately elm trees that had lined both sides of the roadway, as the trees were either dead or dying from Dutch elm disease. This was CARA's first major project, as a crew was put together to remove the trees. Harvey and Howie Mason agreed to cut the trees in return for the rights of the wood. CARA agreed to this, and work began. There were quite a few trees, and they were quite large, many being over 30 inches in diameter or greater. Once the trees were cut, there were many limbs and branches to be disposed of. This was accomplished by Ralph and Harry Steinman, who owned a large bucket truck at the time. Over time, CARA removed large stumps in either excavation or grinding. In the late 70s, Glenridge Nursing Home was proposed by the stipulation of mortgage holders that by two means of access be available before the city would allow a loan. The city of Augusta was anxious for this project to begin and approached the state and CARA about obtaining a 40-year easement which would extend from Hospital Street along the Piggery Road and then follow Augusta East Little League's area across the road that is now from Glenridge. In return for the easement, the city agreed to improve the piggery and including several new culverts along the side of the road. They agreed to fence the adjacent roadway with page wire fencing and cedar posts. The roadway was improved along the stretch, although it still remained gravel. The next work on the Piggery Road was done by the Augusta Water District when they replaced the water line to the Augusta Veterans Home. Little work was done to improve the roadway, but CARA did receive some waste material to fill in. The National Guard had several projects to improve roadways, including raising and grading with gravel, as well as drainage work. CARA provided the necessary grade work. Additional ditching was done by Bridge Construction Company. The roadway, being gravel, became quite dusty and dry in periods, and blowing dust was a nuisance and also posed a major health hazard. CARA did not have the funds to pave the roadway. Through the efforts of Babe Ruth, applied a calcium chloride to the road. This was not a cure-all, but definitely was a nice stopgap measure for the time. CARA received many complaints from disgruntled parents, along with the complaints of general conditions of the roadway. Usually, someone would ask, when are they going to do something about the road? We did have the road graded periodically, and this would help, until the next rainstorm, the current, or the president at the time said. Vandalism to the complex had been an ongoing problem since the operation first began. Theft of maintenance equipment, breaking and entering, discarding of trash, tires, and other unwanted items occurred on many occasions. And actually, it's still an issue to this day. That hasn't gone away. Many parties were held at night, particularly in the undeveloped areas now occupied by soccer and lacrosse. The Augusta Police Department responded to many a complaint at the old complex. These parties also spilled over to the area now occupied by Pine Tree State Arboretum. Another problem was dirt bikes, 4x4 vehicles, and later on ATVs. In order to reduce some of our problems, or their problems rather, CARA felt it was necessary to close the complex at night by installing substantial gates at both ends that locks. LaJoy Brothers Construction did the excavation, poured the forms. Ralph Steinman of Steinman Steel donated the metal and fabricated the gates at the west end, and Ralph donated the steel from the easterly gate fabricated by Mark Newcomb. These gates are very substantial and would not stop. These gates are very substantial, but would not stop a 4x4 from traveling at high speeds, as we found out subsequently. CARA supplied keys to all the legitimate users, including APD and the Augusta Fire Department. The final piece of the puzzle would come into place when Bill Dowling, mayor of Augusta, worked along with city manager Bill Briggio in capacity with the rest of the city council. The city had a major paving project, and Bob Burns, Gary Burns, and Joe Linscott had a role in making sure that the city provided funding along with CARA to have the roadway paved to also include the construction of speed bumps for safety. At a later date, an in-kind money came from the city, paid for the striping of a pedestrian walkway and bikeway combined on the right-hand side. After paving was completed, it became apparent that CARA needed to establish a dedicated fund to pay for the eventual resurfacing of the roadway. It was felt that each member organization, including the Arboretum, should contribute an annual amount to this fund. $500 was felt reasonable to collect from each group, which would be deposited in an interest-bearing account, which would accumulate over time, allowing the road fund to be created, basically. There's considerable usage of the Piggery Road, by various states of government agencies as well as other folks. So it was important to get this road up into basically full capacity. In terms of the sports fields, the first project undertaken was the construction of a new Little League field. This was followed by construction of 2 regulation-sized baseball fields, 2 softball fields, a professional horseshoe pitching complex, a large multi-use fields, 3 Olympic-sized soccer fields, 2 basketball courts, a Little League t-ball field, a softball practice field. In conjunction with these major improvements, considerable infrastructures added in the forms of dugouts, batting cages, bullpens, press boxes, lighting, seating, fencing, concession areas, electric scoreboards, and needed parking. Some fields have in-ground irrigation and drainage, and they have been improved when necessary. The access to the road has been upgraded and is presently paved at one end. Power has been extended and now is available throughout the whole CARA complex, as well as wireless internet. Many visitors to the CARA complex are under the impression that the complex was built and is maintained by the city Augusta staff. This is not the case and is probably what makes the CARA complex so unique when compared to other recreational complexes in and out of state. The complex utilizes no public funds in its ongoing maintenance of a very small amount, and a very small amount of taxpayer dollars has been ever dedicated to the complex in the past 4 decades of construction. Small businesses, lending institutions, contractors, and private donors have assisted over the years, but volunteers have been the primary reason this complex is so unique. CARA's initial board was comprised of the representatives from youth organizations and members at large, and that practice continues to this day. Our first president was Mr. William Perry. He served from 1974 to 1978. Denise Towles came in after from 1979 to 1982. Excuse me, Dennis. Gary Sawyer served from 1983 to October 1985. Joe Linscott served as president from 1985 to 1994. Gary Burns served as president from 1995 to 2005. Paul Potvin served as president from 2005 to 2016. And Mark O'Brien is the current sitting president of the CARA board. Chronological, states of events, guys, just to kind of give some more years, because again, the complex was started in 74, but there's a lot more that obviously, transpired from there, and just kind of give some specific, dates to things as well. So as I said, in 1974, Capital Area Recreation Association is incorporated as a non-profit entity. In 1978, preliminary plans to develop and construct begins on the Augusta Babe Ruth complex, which consists of 2 regulation-sized ball fields, one of which will be large enough to accommodate other uses such as junior football or even soccer at the time. 1979, lights are installed at Linscott Field, McGuire Field construction completed, and play begins. 1980, CARA removes all the dead, diseased elms, as mentioned prior. They also start the Kennebec Horseshoe Pitchers, and they construct a 20-court horseshoe pitching complex. Morton Field is constructed and completed. The field is large enough to accommodate both baseball and soccer, if need be. A National Guard construction project upgrades the Piggery Road by installing 12-inch gravel bases and culverts. Moving into the middle 80s, Minuteman Field was constructed in 1985 and is completed to allow play. By 1986, Capital Area Votech constructs dugouts and large press boxes at Minuteman Field as well. And moving into the 1990s, lighting is installed on Reveille and Minuteman Fields. 1991, the lease with the Bureau of Public Lands is renegotiated for the 99-year period, extending to 12/3/2090. 1994, construction begins a large multi-purpose parking lot area. The field's known as CARA Youth Memorial Field is completed in November. By 1995, backstops and dugouts are installed on CARA fields and play begins. 1997, CARA receives dismantled Hadlock Field bleachers, and some funding for the erection of the bleachers from the city of Augusta also came into play. Construction begins on the 1,500-seat bleacher project in that year as well. 1998, CARA signs a sublease with Capital Area Youth Soccer Association for the necessary land to construct Olympic-sized soccer fields, which is still there today and which is also a huge part of what I do. 1999, construction begins on the soccer fields. From 2000 to 2005, a lot of more modern projects took place on the complex. Paving the easterly end of the Piggery Road begins. Soccer complex is completed in 2001. In 2002, Patriot Field is constructed and completed in a 3-month period. The east end of the Piggery Road paving project is also completed later on then. 2004, the connector road between Morton Field parking lot and the soccer complex is constructed. Construction begins on the 85 vehicle parking spot, an access road, and 2 basketball courts in 2005. In 2006, basketball courts are paved, parking lot completed, courts are striped and fenced, basketball courts dedicated to John Bridge. August 2006, the parking lot adjacent to Minuteman Field is built. An expansion to Morton Field parking lot is also completed or built as well. Moving on to 2008, the Minuteman fields are resurfaced. 2009, Augusta Babe Ruth begins construction of drainage improvements for Morton Field, drainage work for the adjacent field systems. And moving into the 2020s, the 2010s getting in, or 2010s getting into the 2020s. 2010, Augusta Babe Ruth continues with a 5-year drainage project. Always projects to be done with the road and drainage. Augusta Babe Ruth completes more projects along the field. There was a replacement of new fence on the soccer practice and new dugouts put in on Linscott Field. And later on in 2024, moving ahead several years, guys, CARA, is celebrating its 50th anniversary and also secures the land rights from the state of Maine to take basically the entire complex under its wing and become self-autonomous completely. That's been the coolest thing about this year, guys, is that it has allowed, us to continue and to thrive and also just, become even bigger than what we were in a lot of ways, now that we have full autonomy over, we're not lessees anymore. We are the owners of the complex. And so, like I said, as I said before, CARA is a nonprofit 501c3, meaning that, any donation to the organization, is important. The donations is basically how we, um, is how we survive, and they do that, or we do that via having 2 fundraising events, which are huge. One of them I was just at today, honest, before I sat down to record this, a little late on my end, but so be it. We have our golf tournament in the second week of September, and we have our auction, which I've talked about on here before, in May. And they are our 2 big money makers that keep the lights on, allow us to pave the road and do drainage projects and all these other things that, like I talked about, earlier. And like I said, CARA is just a very special organization. It would not be here without a lot of the people, like Bill Perry and some of the other people that we talked about earlier on. But also, Joe Linscott was another very important person in that. And there's many other people who I don't even know, who have donated over the years. Because like I said, I'm one of the younger members on the board. I don't know everybody, but I just from what little history I do know, and some research that I've done as well. It just really is, we're very lucky that people, were willing to step up. And I think that's what makes CARA unique to everybody else, is that, or anything else really, is that the people that, are part of this organization have been willing to step up across the board whenever they need to. And that's community members too. And that's why I think the Augusta area is so special, because people are willing to help each other. Like, one of the, some of the largest contractors in the area are more than willing to, do whatever they can to help out, and it's awesome to see. Couldn't do it without them, and I'm glad, that people are so generous and are willing to give to an organization like CARA, because it's important. And I mean, it's also hard for a lot of these people to, complain, because there's nothing to really complain about, because the fields are in immaculate shape. The kids have a safe place to play, sports. And I understand kids do a lot more than sports, guys, but I mean, sports is a huge part of, at least growing up for me, it was. I mean, I know it's not for everybody, but the fact of the matter being is that, everybody needs something to do. And if we're going to have kids do stuff, it might as well be safe. And that's the beauty of the CARA complex, guys. So again, we are celebrating our 50th anniversary this year in 2024, but we will not have an actual in-person celebration until next year. There just wasn't enough time. Like I said, we are a volunteer organization, and when the sports seasons start, there just isn't enough time. Myself included. Like I said, I'm on the soccer board. I'm also a CARA board member as well. And CARA is actually made up, all the member organizations make up the CARA board, basically. There are people that are just members of the CARA board that, want to, have being part of a nonprofit on their resume or whatever, or just care about the community. But the majority of people actually come from or either have kids or physically have played themselves or whatever it may be, guys. And that's what makes this organization so special. Like I said, I can't say enough good things about CARA. If you want to hear more about CARA in another, another context, you can go back and listen to my episode with Dave Hastings. You can also go back and listen to my episode with Al Cloutier, and we talk about CARA quite a bit. Because they are two of what I consider the founding people, or the anchor people for when I came through. And some of those people are starting to, they're in their 70s, 80s now, and some even in their 90s, and are still, involved. And it's amazing to see. Some have taken a step back, but they're never gone. They always come back for the golf tournament. They always come back for the auction or whatever it is, or they at least, send good wishes, or whatever that may be. So like I said, it's really unique, guys. And like I said, that there are people that have been able to put so much of their own stuff aside to make sure that this community is actually a better place. So that has been CARA 50, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed that first segment on the Capital Area Recreation Association. Like I said, it just needed to be talked about. CARA having its anniversary is a big deal as far as I'm concerned, and want to make sure as many people know about it as possible, because, like I said, a lot of people are still under the major they have a lot of misconceptions about the complex. There are probably more misconceptions than there actually are true conceptions. You see what I'm saying? But that said, guys, that was CARA 50. We're now going to move on to our second story post-drink. And our second story post drink is definitely a bit different, I will admit. So this is going to be the second story, as I should say, is the titled GD Lewiston 44. And what that means is the Grateful Dead played in Lewiston 44 years ago. So people, always think a lot of the big shows. I'm a Deadhead, guys. I mean, as we've talked about first and foremost, but, it's getting to the point where some of these shows happened 40, 50, years ago, and like, to the point where they're even still talked about, and like, especially this show right here, that was at the State Fairgrounds in Lewiston. I mean, it was a incredible show, which I'll unpack in just a little bit. I mean, you can actually go and listen to. There are recordings of this show. That's the cool thing about the Grateful Dead, guys. They encourage people to tape their shows. Like, they let people come in and basically bootleg and rip off their music, essentially. But it created this huge community and this whole unique situation where there's so many of their recordings now out there, which is cool. And they really created a lot of these, business practices, I guess you could call them today, but they were just, not trying to have rules and just let people be them and just do their thing. You know what I mean? Like, like I said, they encouraged people to bring microphones and taping equipment. And at the time, like by the late 70s, taping equipment had gotten pretty portable by the 80s and 90s, and as we are today, you guys see it. I mean, to the point where even if you go and see Dead and Company, they record the entire like live show, and you can go and listen to the album after on Spotify or whatever, streaming service you're on. And I think that's really cool. That's wicked. You're able to relive the experience. But that's part of the reason the Grateful Dead is so cool in a lot of ways and still so celebrated, is because so many of their recordings are still out there from so many of their live shows, which was really the lifeblood of that group. They did make, in studio albums, but the real thing that drew people to the Grateful Dead was their live performances, especially, with the lighting, drums in space, and also just the regular jammy aspect of the band, as well as playing blues music as well. Really kind of encapsulating the true American experience as far as I'm concerned. But again, I'm biased. So this is GD, Grateful Dead, Lewiston 44. 44 years ago, the Grateful Dead and their caravan descended on the now non-existent Maine State Fairgrounds in Lewiston. It was the final show of their 1980s summer tour. 1980 specifically. The year, the Saturday concert was a hot one, but fans certainly got their money's worth. The band played 27 songs over about a 4-hour span, give or take. Set one, you had Alabama. They opened up with Alabama Getaway, led in with the greatest story ever told, Sugar-E, Me and My Uncle, Mexicali Blues, Tennessee Jed, Feel Like a Stranger, Friend of the Devil, Far From Me, Little Red Rooster, China Cat Sunflower, I Know You Rider, Little Smoke and China Rider, and Promised Land. They after their break, they came back out with a ripping Shakedown Street in set two, Lost Sailor, Saint of Circumstances, Althea, Playing in the Band, Uncle John's Band, Drums, Not Fade Away, The Wheel, Uncle John's Band Part 2, Playing in the Band Part 2, Sugar Magnolia. And with the encore, One More Saturday Night, and Broke Down Palace. Despite some other sold shows on this day, we were going, like I said, to the 1980s specifically to focus on their show at the fairgrounds. Alabama Getaway introduces the very first set and is in a fully rocking from the very beginning, as I said. The song later, Sugar-E Towers Above, probably the highlight of the entire show, is Jerry pulls off beautiful vocals and guitar while Brent adds some computer funky keys. The next, the boys rip Me and My Uncle and Mexicali before arriving at a jammed out Tennessee Jed. But it feels like a stranger in that mid set that, besides Sugar-E, defines the first half. Bobby lays it down while Phil puts a headlong bass line and Brent adds his brilliant, ominous keys. At the end of the set, a China Cat Sunflower, I Know You Rider, Promised Land. China Cat into I Know You Rider into Promised Land sends things into a break. China Cat is filled with energy as Jerry drives the theme on, eventually transitioning into a mood. Testy, I Know You Rider, and then after the slightest of the breaks on an absolutely scandalizing Promised Land rips forth. Rob Sturdy, a member of Down East Dead and a tribute band, was at the concert. He came from the University of Maine at Augusta, where he was a freshman studying music theory at the time. He remembers the band left it all on stage. Quote, it was just, I don't know, the air was electric that day. And I remember everyone was thirsty and it was hot and there wasn't enough drinking stations. So they had sprinklers going everywhere off the edge near furthest back points. We were all running back through there to get soaked down so we weren't roasting to death. But it was a 4-hour show. They had a big break in the middle, of course, but it was one of the longest shows ever for them. I remember reading in an interview with Phil Lesh where he said it was one of his favorite shows of the whole 80s just because almost every song, the versions were as good as they ever did. I don't know. They were just on fire those days, close quote. The Grateful Dead were notorious for allowing fans to tape and record their live shows. So, like I said, many of their recordings of the Lewiston show can still be found online today. Which concert attendee Drew Barry said had helped the legend of the Lewiston show live on. Quote, there's a wealth of good recordings of that show, and sometimes it helps build the legend. So if it's available and well recorded, people say, that was the greatest show. And of course, they're not going to say that about some old scratchy old recording that you can barely hear. So there's a lot of things that go into that, he explained. But, quote, we're very fortunate there were a lot of people there to record. For whatever reason, in that outdoor setting, the recording was almost universally came out great across the board. I knew people who had recorded up there and were very lucky to have those recordings. The band, there's no official recording that I know of exists, so it's all due to people recording from the audience. Barry had just seen a Dead concert with friends in Philadelphia before moving to Boston for his freshman year at BU. Instead of preparing for BU orientation, he found a concert ticket and hitched up to Lewiston. He detailed the experience in his journal entry below, which he shared to News Center Maine. Quote, I arrived at BU on September 2nd, a Tuesday. After settling in for a few days, I was at the campus bookstore picking up some books and other materials when I noticed a small ad to a bulletin board. Wanted. Riders to Lewiston Dead concert. Have room for 2. I had completely forgotten. How could I get tickets? The spots were still open, and were the spots even still open in this guy's car? I scribbled down the phone number and ran back to my dorm to make a call. Sure enough, the guy still had room. Got no tickets, though. Try the ticket place in Kenmore or Store 24. They probably still got them. We're leaving Friday night after class. Show's Saturday. I was in. I bought a ticket at a place in Kenmore Square, out of town. Tickets, I think. A miracle. I hooked up with the ride and the tickets and no explaining to do. I was on my own. Jumping into that situation where you just left home, you've gotten newfound freedom, you're going out to an adventure, not even with friends or anything, just taking off and going. It kind of harkens to the road days or something like that, not to make it overly dramatic, Barry told News Center Maine. You don't have chances like that, you know. You just have to have a chance once where you have some freedom. And those first few times you're out on your own. It's kind of fun. Grateful Dead fans are also very active on the community of in Facebook. Founding member Bob Weir posted to social media Monday to mark the anniversary of the Lewiston show, and the love for the band and the show that was palpable in the comment section as well. Other quotes from Deadheads that commented on this post. Don't you just love that the band would play these small New England outdoor venues and then just shred for us? Thanks, everyone, for filling in some blanks. New England shows rock. Quote, my hometown and senior year in high school, there were only 3 to 4 Deadheads in my class. The Dead were coming to play a quarter mile from my childhood home. That was dreams come true. What an epic show, said Ralph Davis. What an absolute memorable show. Literally anyone who went has a story involving, quote unquote, getting there, the wheel, the doses, starting the academic year slightly bug eyed. What an amazing show it was. The best times, said Peg at Pop. 6 of us packed into my friend's Buick, and 6 hours later, we arrive in Maine from New York City. And the doses, oh, the doses. I keep telling my friends, did you see that? Then I'd say, what colors? He'd say, green and yellow or orange and blue. And it was always the same that I saw. LOL, we snuck right up to the stage, and I remember checking out Jerry and thinking how cool he looked in wearing his sunglasses. Great time, said Joe Flo. I would argue it was the best sugary in history. They playing out of their minds during that show, said Matt Folan. The Grateful Dead and a holiday weekend. The way life should be, said Eric Boston. Lewiston, Maine was my first Grateful Dead show. Most of my friends had been seeing the Dead at the Capitol Theater in Passaic, New Jersey, and other local venues in New York and New Jersey, but I had always been working as a kid. But finally, the opportunity came when I was up in Boston attending Northeastern University. A bunch of lifelong friends had decided to hitch up to Maine for the show. We split into pairs, knowing most cars wouldn't be able to pick up groups of people, and we'd find each other at the show. So I buddied up with my friend Doug and we started to get an early start and launched out of Boston around midnight, after a party. Getting rides in the middle of the night was near impossible. We made about 10 to 15 miles outside of Boston and set up a tent for the night. We awoke to golf balls hitting our tent. We had set up on a green. The golfers were not happy. Back on the highway in the morning, we get picked up right away by a fire engine filled with tie-dye freaks from MIT. They owned this fire engine and would take it to shows. They took us right to the show, and we eventually connected with everyone else who hitched up. Sadly, we missed Roy Buchanan as one of the openers, but caught the last Levon Helm before the Dead came out and rocked Maine hard. We still reminisce about this adventure to this day. Forever grateful, said Bill Transu. My driving privileges were suspended in Maine for not paying a speeding ticket on the way to the show. One often wonders if the suspension is still in force, said June Haffer McMorrow. Quote, the day was great, hot as hell. They came in the early afternoon and played what seemed like forever. Over 4 hours, which made tape trading tough. 2.5 tapes, said Steve Dinsmore. One of my favorite all-time shows was at the Fairgrounds, perfect-sized venue for the Dead at the time. I still have one of the show posters, Dead Go to Heaven cover shot, that I took off the fence as we were leaving. Lewiston, Maine, accepted us with open arms, which was nice. This was the scene was starting to get sketchy, according to this fan, and some venues started to ban the Dead, said Steve Tass. And I guess this is what these kind of, the rest of these, I'll read a couple more, obviously, but I guess a lot of these, firsthand accounts, because I wasn't there, guys. As much as I would love to be there and, said I was there, obviously wasn't. I'm way too young to be at anything like that, unfortunately, but I do love the music, and I do love the whole, the idea of being able to go out on the road. That's kind of like a very American experience. You don't just, pack up in Europe and go, on a road trip. You just don't. It's just not... you can, there's a great documentary for the Grateful Dead, A Long Strange Trip, which I highly recommend everybody watch if you really want to, if you don't know that much about the Grateful Dead or you're trying to get into the Grateful Dead. It's actually made by Bill Kreutzmann's son, Justin Kreutzmann, and he does a great job and I mean, like I said, the guys from the surviving members of the band are in on it, so they're interviewed, and it's just really an awesome experience. And they interview Sam Cutler at one point, and Sam was their touring manager in the early '70s, got them the Europe '72 tour, as well as a lot of the early, like Working Man's Dead, American Beauty era tours, and he said, yeah, like that's a uniquely American thing. You don't just pick up on and like go on the road, and I think that that's still a I guess not only just like a way of life, but also like a spirit that is still in like an experience that is still like wanted or like longed after. I guess is what I'm trying to say here, guys. And you can still see that today. I mean, like that's the fact of the matter being is that you can see, uh, how people still want to experience this. Like, look out to the Sphere. People are spending tons of money to go to Vegas and see Dead and Company. It's not even the original lineup of the Grateful Dead. It's technically a cover band, if you want to be real. Um, and same thing with like some of these other, cover bands like Dark Star Orchestra. Great show. I mean, but the fact that they are a cover band. It's not even and they're still, charging, $100, not $100 tickets, but you know what I'm saying. Like they're still able to fill, venues like Thompson's Point and some of these other places. It really kind of, I guess, attests to the legacy of the group, and that's the cool thing. We get to hear from these people directly. I apologize if I've murdered, or butchered any of these names of folks or any of the quotes, but that said, it really kind of gives you the first-hand insight. And if you're a deadhead, I mean, you know what I'm saying when I'm talking about, ripping China Rider and stuff. But for those of you that are like, what is he talking about? It all explains it, guys. Like I said, if you just do a little bit of research, it goes a long way. I mean, I'll give you part of the information, but I'm not going to give you the whole equation. But that said, we'll go back to a couple more experiences from the show. After the show the next day, a bunch of us who were on the summer tour, we went to some ocean beach nearby for an end of tour party camp out. Anyone go to that? Said Albert, Australia. I worked hard at the bank, and they recruited some of us to work the ticket booth. I guess they thought the bank employees would be honest with the money, said Carol Emerson. I watched the entire show a few rows from the stage. Phil drove the show end to end. He was a maestro extraordinaire. A few weeks later, we were waiting online to buy tickets for the 3-set Radio City run. This band was committed to bankrupting me and my limited college student budget, said Howard Horder. The Lewiston show wasn't the only show the Grateful Dead played in Maine. According to the post, the band's social media pages, they played 16 shows in 6 different places across Maine throughout their careers. The caravan even came to the Oxford Plains Speedway in July 1988 for 2 holiday weekend shows, as well as to the Augusta Civic Center in October of 1984. So again, guys, just to kind of give you a little difference in the podcast format, that was the Grateful Dead in Lewiston 44 years ago. That has been your second story of the episode, guys, and I just wanted to thank you all for listening to these 2 little mini segments. And I know it's been a lot of script reading, guys, so I apologize if that's not your cup of tea in terms of the episode. We will be back through the end of the year with guests, guys. Like I said, there's no reason to not be. I just wanted to, take time and just do a solo episode because things have been busy. Like I said, that's kind of just how it works, guys. If you see a solo episode, odds are I just don't have time. That's just the reality of it. But that said, that doesn't mean that the quality has to drop or anything like that. But I said if reading listen to me read a script isn't for you, this might not be your episode. But that said, I appreciate all of you guys that tune in regardless and religiously, whether it be on YouTube or any of the other platforms. Like I said, I know there are a lot of podcasts out there, and I appreciate you guys for choosing mine because again, there's a lot out there. So that said, guys, thank you so much for tuning in again. I know I've said thank you about 3 times already, but thank you one more time for tuning in. I really do appreciate you guys. And like I said, I'll be back in October with another episode. This still turned out to be a relatively decent long episode. I mean, nice to break things up a little bit. Great to have Becca on. Shout out to Becca for being a great guest on last month's podcast. That episode's doing awesome. Love you, honey. So that said, guys, thank you one more time for tuning in, and find us on YouTube, the DuView Podcast, as well as on Facebook, the DuView Podcast, DuView 207 on Instagram, and like I said, the DuView Podcast wherever you get your podcast, guys, or on YouTube, like you said. Look us up, share us. We're always looking for new opportunities and new things. Like I said, reach out if you got something to say. If you see something, say something. You know what I mean? So that said, guys, hope everybody's doing well. Hope fall is good to everybody. Because, like I said, the temperatures are going to start dropping here pretty soon, guys. So settle in. It's going to be fun. Get cozy. We will see you guys back here in another month for your October episode of the DuView podcast. So that being said, guys, be safe, be well, and we will talk very soon.